Hello, I'm Esther Gidu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Hostilities between Israel and Hamas have resumed on Friday following Hamas' alleged violation of a temporary ceasefire. The global community unites for World AIDS Day to raise awareness about HIV/AIDS, commemorate those who lost lives, and reaffirm the commitment to combating HIV/AIDS. And in our entertainment report, Heather Maxwell has the latest news on Nigerian artists and Afrobeat music. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The Israeli Defense Forces say its war against Hamas in Gaza has resumed on Friday. The IDF says resumption of hostilities follows Hamas' violation of a temporary truce and the militant group's launching of a rocket attack on Israel. The IDF said on the social media platform X that it had successfully intercepted the rocket launch from Gaza. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says at least 32 people died in the first hours of Friday's attack. The return to the fighting comes after a 7-day truce that allowed for the exchange of Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met with Israeli President Isaac Herzog in Tel Aviv Thursday. Blinken told Herzog the United States believed the truce was producing results and should continue.
We have seen over the last week the very positive development of hostages coming home, being reunited with their families, and that should continue today. It's also enabled an increase in humanitarian assistance to go to innocent civilians in Gaza who need it desperately. So this process is producing results. It's important, and we hope that it can continue.
Secretary Blinken is ending his Middle East trip with a Friday visit to the United Arab Emirates, where he is expected to discuss Gaza with Arab world leaders attending the UN Climate Conference in Dubai. For more on the ending of the ceasefire, I'm joined by Ricky Rosen from Tel Aviv. Ricky, what's the latest in the conflict?
Well, we have witnessed the resumption of the war, both on the Israeli side and the Hamas in Gaza, but at a slightly lower intensity than it was before the ceasefire. So there are fewer rockets. There was just about an hour ago a few rockets coming into central Israel from Hamas in Gaza. And there's also less intense fighting on the part of the Israeli army in Gaza. Part of that may be in response to the warning that Secretary of State Blinken gave to Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying that when fighting was resumed, they expected that there would be more care taken to avoid civilian casualties in Gaza, and so the Israeli army has tried to minimize the places in which they are bombing and alert the Gazan residents to where they should avoid in order to avoid the destruction of the airstrip.
Ricky, we hear of despair from families that have been awaiting their loved ones, especially 20 women that they've been awaiting, and some of the babies that were also taken hostage on October 7th. Do we have any updates on that?
Well, I think the hostage families were hoping that the temporary ceasefire would last for the planned 10 days, would have allowed for the return of all of the women and child hostages. In fact, the fact that it was stopped after 7 days leaves, as you said, 20 women, and most of them are young women who were taken hostage at a music festival in the desert on October 7th. These are young women, and their families fear for their safety, especially amid the report of sexual violence that was committed by the Hamas militants when they took the hostages and when they killed women on October 7th. The families are also concerned about the more than 100 men who are killed.
Ricky, many thanks for your reporting. We're kind of losing that audio there, but we understand what you're saying. Ricky Rosen, reporting live for us from Tel Aviv in Israel. It's time for our health report, and, oh, well, right, Ricky. It's time for a health report, and here's Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. Hello, everyone. Every year on December 1st, the global community unites for World AIDS Day to raise awareness about HIV/AIDS, commemorate those who lost their lives, and reaffirm the commitment to combating HIV/AIDS. HIV has claimed over 40 million lives worldwide and remains a major global public health issue, according to the World Health Organization. Sub-Saharan Africa is home to 60% of all people living with HIV, the heaviest HIV burden globally. Experts say gender inequalities and harmful gender norms are causing the high rates of infections. A new UNAIDS report, Let Communities Lead, reveals that AIDS can be ended as a public health threat by 2030, but only if communities on the front lines get the full support they need from governments and donors. I spoke with Anjali Achrekar, UNAIDS Deputy Executive Director, for more on the findings.
It's really fantastic to be with you on World AIDS Day today. Where we can actually celebrate the incredible progress that has been made, particularly on the continent of Africa, over the past 20 years. We are seeing 70% declines in AIDS deaths since the peak of the epidemic. We're seeing record lows, new infections of HIV. And the reason we have focused on letting communities lead as the focus of the report, but also the theme for World AIDS Day, is because what we have learned is that the path to end AIDS has truly been trailblazed by communities themselves. Countries that are succeeding when they have communities at the front line of the AIDS pandemic that are leading the way. The challenges that communities face is related to being under-acknowledged, being under-resourced, and in some cases, being under attack. On this World AIDS Day, we're actually not only putting out the report, but we're making a call to the world to say, please make sure we are acknowledging the vital role that communities play, we are adequately resourcing them, and third, we are protecting their rights so that they can continue to play that critical leadership role that they have in the HIV response, but also across other health threats.
That was Anjali Achrekar, the UNAIDS Deputy Executive Director. A new UNAIDS report is urging governments to empower communities worldwide to lead the fight to end the AIDS threat by 2030, but only if those on the front lines get the support they need from governments and donors, as mentioned. VOA's Paul Ndio has more.
9.2 million people worldwide living with HIV do not have access to life-saving treatment. Every single minute, a life is lost to AIDS, and every week, 4,000 adolescent girls and young women are newly infected by HIV. Those figures are in a new report from the Joint United Nations Programme on HIV and AIDS. The UNAIDS agency is urging governments to unleash the power of community organizations to lead the fight to end AIDS. The African continent is home to 2/3 of all people living with HIV/AIDS. There are concerns that there is a blind spot in the response to HIV globally when it comes to providing HIV services to men and boys. Some AIDS activists say that it's particularly true in South Africa. Libohanga Siboni, a peer educator and mentor at Men's Forum, explains.
Basically, we talk with men in a session of a dialogue. It can be a session of whereby we like calling the tavern interventions. That's whereby we go to the taverns, have a group of guys, discuss with them on issues that affect them as men.
Men are less likely than women to use health services. They are less likely to take an HIV test, which means they are less likely to know whether they are HIV positive. Charles Mfefu, founder, Men's Forum NGO, explains the importance of a community-led organization.
We need to change and focus on men and change the social behavior in terms of men's health also. Men were neglected, they didn't want to go to clinic, they don't even have information about the HIV and AIDS.
Ndisheni Mngoni is a prevention advisor at UNAIDS.
Communities are at the center of HIV response. You are not going to win the battle or the fight against HIV at a clinic level. At the policy level, you win it in the community.
Experts say gender-based violence, multiple sexual partners, and the irregular use of condoms means that men's sexual partners face increased risks of acquiring HIV and other sexually transmitted infections. Paul Diho, VOA News, Washington.
Gunfire in Guinea.
No, let me go to this one.
Okay.
All right. Back to our news. Gunfire in Guinea-Bissau's capital erupted overnight into Friday morning in what local media are reporting as clashes between security forces. The Democrat newspaper reported that the shooting involved members of the National Guard and the Presidential Police Battalion after two senior government officials were improperly released from custody. The two officials, Guinea-Bissau's finance minister and treasury secretary, are under investigation for alleged corruption. The public ministry ordered them rearrested. The army says it is holding the leader of the security forces unit involved in the clashes and has the situation under control. Still to come, Heather Maxwell has the latest news on Nigerian artists and Afrobeat music. We'll be right back.
Sextortion is the abuse of power to obtain a sexual benefit, according to a study done by Harvard University. It can manifest itself in various forms, including demanding sex in exchange for grades. This unsavory practice is used against female students in Nigeria, Botswana, Tanzania, and it's been used to exploit women seeking employment in South Africa. This week on Our Voices, we are discussing the sextortion of women in Africa. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Jackson Vunganyi, thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
The U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPfar, was established in 2003 by then President George W. Bush to address the devastation caused by HIV/AIDS. Since then, over $100 billion has been invested in the global HIV response. That is $100 billion, saving 25 million lives and preventing millions of HIV infections, according to U.S. government data. For more insight, Lindon Mudu spoke with Ambassador at Large John Kengasong, U.S. Global AIDS Coordinator and Special Representative for Health Diplomacy. Here's our interview.
The PEPfar program is a great symbol of solidarity and care from the American people to the continent of Africa. If we just imagine 20 years ago what HIV was doing on the continent of Africa, it was a symbol of hopelessness at that time because nobody knew what to do. The public health experts and doctors could diagnose HIV, but that was the end of the story. It was a death sentence. PEPfar came in and in 20 years has saved about 25 million lives, prevented HIV infections from infected mothers to infants in the tune of over 5.5 million. So I don't know of any intervention in the history of infectious diseases in this decade that has led to such a significant impact and outcome.
When you look at programs that are being implemented on the ground, a program like PEPfar, what makes it strong in terms of the implementation? When we look at communities, public and private partnership, what makes a program like PEPfar strong when it comes to implementing it?
The country's leadership has to be strong and committed to it, because as you rightly said, if PEPfar just came in with the money and the countries were not committed to it and recognized the importance of what the disease was doing to their families, to their communities, we would not have success. It requires partnerships that PEPfar is supporting countries, but you also have other partners like the Global Fund working there, the World Bank and others working together. But very importantly, it has to be driven by data. It has to be driven by evidence. Meaning who is infected? Where is that person infected? So that we apply the resources very efficiently.
How do communities take ownership of their health and be part of the solution when it comes to fighting a pandemic, an epidemic like the HIV/AIDS crisis, even drawing from the experience with COVID as well?
The communities are so central in the response to every epidemic or outbreak or pandemic. During HIV response, where we've made progress, and countries that have made significant progress are countries that have embraced the community very early on. Without the communities, there is hardly any vehicle that can reach a broader audience in these communities that we are trying to serve than the community themselves. It should actually be community leadership, not just community engagement. When the community leads, we make progress.
What do you see as some of the main challenges today in Africa when it comes to the fight against HIV/AIDS?
We've come a long way in partnering with several governments in Africa to fight HIV/AIDS. One challenge we have is the adolescent girls and young women. The rates of new infections in some countries is about 6 times higher amongst adolescent girls and young women than in the corresponding age in boys or men. Second, we have to look at children. The progress we've made in advancing HIV response in adults is not equivalent. It's not the same progress we've seen in children. In children, we are still looking at 50-50-50, which is 50% of children who are infected are aware of their status, 50% who know their status are under treatment, and 50% viral suppression.
2030 is an important date for not only the Sustainable Development Goals, but also HIV, of course. What does the road to 2030 looks like when it comes to meeting the target in reducing HIV/AIDS?
2030 is about 6 years from now, and 6 short years I'll add. So it means for the HIV response that we need to accelerate our efforts to, first of all, achieve the 2025 goals, which was set up and agreed on by all of us and set up by the UN AIDS, which essentially says that by 2025, many countries should achieve the 395. 95% of people knowing their status, 95% on treatment, and 95% with viral suppression.
Our thanks to Lino Mudu for that special report on World AIDS Day. In other news, more than 2 million people across the Horn of Africa have been forced from their homes by torrential rains and floods, according to government and UN data. Almost 300 people have lost their lives in Somalia, Kenya, and Ethiopia due to flooding. Starvation, torture, robbery. Young Ethiopian migrant returnees recount the horrors they endured on endless journeys in search of a better life in the Middle East. Hundreds of thousands of people, mainly Ethiopians, who each year embark on a treacherous journey across the Horn of Africa in search of economic opportunity. And authorities in Benin are introducing 2 new military medals to reward soldiers as the army grapples with a mounting jihadist threat on the country's northern border. The move reflects Benin's struggle with spillover from conflicts in the Sahel, where militants linked to the Islamic State group and Al-Qaeda have stepped up attacks. U.S. President Joe Biden met with Angolan President João Lourenço Thursday, with the leaders focusing on a $1 billion U.S.-funded rail development. VOA's Anita Powell has more from the White House.
President Joe Biden extended a warm welcome and spoke of major plans while hosting Angolan President João Lourenço for the first time. Biden cast this rare Oval Office visit by an African leader as an exemplar of his retooled Africa strategy.
And as you've heard me say before, America is all in on Africa.
Their hour-long meeting Thursday mainly focused on a U.S.-funded rail corridor that runs from Angola's oil-rich coast deep into the African interior, where China and the U.S. are competing for access to resources. It cuts through volatile southern Congo, which is rich in rare earth minerals, and dips into copper-rich Zambia. The two also agreed to hold in 2024 a dialogue focused on the secure and stable supply of energy. The U.S. has held similar talks with oil giant Nigeria.
Portanto, o envolvimento americano no projeto do corredor do Lobito.
The U.S. engagement in the Lobito corridor in telecommunications and energy, mainly green energy, is an evidence of that support, because infrastructures like those will help the development not only of Angola, but the whole African continent.
Grande parte do nosso continente.
VOA asked the White House how this corridor, to which Biden has committed $1 billion, can work without peace in Congo, which is part of Lourenço's work as the African Union's top peace envoy. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby didn't say what steps the administration is taking to support Lourenço's efforts in the troubled region, where matters are further complicated by a few long-serving leaders with large personalities, well-documented violations of human rights, civil liberties, and democratic practices, and a history of interfering in one another's affairs. He did mention Biden's infrastructure and investment plan for the region, PGII.
The president's very excited about this. This is a real landmark effort as part of PGI and helping lower and middle income countries find sustainable investments in their infrastructure that can not only create jobs, but also open up economic opportunities, in this case, all across that southern part of sub-Saharan Africa. So it's very exciting, and we're gonna keep pushing forward with it.
Analysts say the corridor's success depends on lasting peace in Congo, which votes next month in a contest between the incumbent and the leader of the southern state that will host the corridor. But China may also have a role to play.
There's going to be a need to cooperate while also compete with China in order to make the Lobito corridor a success. And I think that's sort of what's happening behind the scenes with China. You know, the Lobito corridor is both competition and to some extent is going to probably be cooperation.
VOA asked what Biden wanted to communicate to Lourenço about criticism of his human rights record.
We never shy away from talking about human rights. The president routinely brings that up.
Lourenço stopped for less than a minute with the gathered press before he left the White House. The meeting, he said, went better than expected. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
It's time for Entertainment Report, and joining us now is Heather Maxwell. Hello, Heather.
Hello, Esther. Thank you. The host of VOA's Red Carpet, Jackson Mvunganyi, joins me to talk about the latest news on Nigerian artists and the popular music genre Afrobeats. Hey, Jackson. Hello. It's great to have you on.
Hello, Heather. It's good to be here with you.
Super. So let's take a look, and then we'll get back to you.
Rema, Burna Boy, and Davido, 3 Nigerian Afrobeats artists who Rema, Burna Boy, and Davido, 3 Nigerian Afrobeats artists who have made some incredible music history this year. These 3 artists are sitting on top of the world as this year starts to come to a close. At the first Trace Awards and Festival at the BK Arena in Kigali, Rwanda, which was televised live to over 350 million viewers and music fans around the world, Davido took home the prizes for Best Male Artist and Best Collaboration with South Africa's Musici's for the song Unavailable. Rema won Global African Artist and Song of the Year with Calm Down. And Burna Boy scored the prize for Best Album with Love Damini. Now, at the Billboard Awards in Las Vegas, the new Top Afrobeats category was awarded. Rema took home the Top Afrobeats Song Award with his Calm Down.
This honor for Calm Down is a celebration of unity and the global domination of Afrobeats.
And Burna Boy, Top Afrobeats Artist.
This is dedicated to Africa and every artist coming out of Africa now, you get me? This is for you, and yeah, man, the future is bright.
Also, 2 U.S. cities inaugurated an annual Davido Day. Mayor of Houston, Sylvester Turner, declared it on July 7th after the artist sold out the 40,000 capacity Toyota Arena. And the singer's hometown of Atlanta, Mayor Andre Dickens, proclaimed it on November 18th.
Wow. Jackson, so what do you think about all this?
Listen, I love it. I love it. Afrobeats is having its moment. Remember, you and I have been working on this, covering Afrobeats for the last over 10 years now.
I know.
Remember when Afrobeat artists were not even allowed on the Grammy stage. You know,
Yes.
they would receive their awards a day before,
That's
off camera.
right. Yep.
You know, I remember Wizkid calling out the Grammys one time a couple of years ago, but now they have their own category, and you know, the Billboard has its own category now for Afrobeats. It's a recognition for the hard work that these young artists have been putting in, selling out massive stadiums around the world, millions of fans. I love to hear it. I love to see more of this.
It's incredible. So next week, Kigali, Rwanda hosts the second greatest rapper of all time, that is in the world, according to Billboard and Vibe magazine, Kendrick Lamar. Now, he's going to headline at a new global citizen festival called Move Africa, which is the beginning of a 5-year series of African festivals going on. But why, Jackson, do you think all this is taking place? Why is Kigali the center right now? I mean, you're from Rwanda, so I figured maybe you might have some insight there.
Some insight. Well, one for Rwanda, I think Rwanda has been positioning itself as a destination for artists, for the arts, for sports. In the last couple of years, Rwanda depends on tourism for its revenue dollars, and so you know, whether it's Basketball Africa League, whether it's festivals and the awards like the Trace Awards that happened recently, anything that brings the eyeballs and visitors to Rwanda, I think they are really intentional about doing that.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting. What do you think about Kendrick Lamar? You think he'll be a hit in Rwanda?
He will be a hit. I don't know how many Rwandans actually are fans of hip-hop music as a genre, but either way, the excitement of having, you know, the best rapper, honestly, in my view, in the world coming to your city, that in itself, whether you're a fan of hip-hop or not, just having Kendrick Lamar in Kigali is quite cool.
Yeah. That's amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show, Jackson.
Thank you so much.
All right, that's all we have for you today. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you so much, Heather and Jackson. That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website right here on voaafrica.com. From all of us here, we thank you for watching.